The wind howled like a wounded beast, shaking the wooden walls of Adam Carter's cabin. Snow battered the window pane, a relentless curtain of white stretching as far as the eye could see. The blizzard had rolled in fast, too fast, trapping him in a world of ice and isolation. Adam didn't mind. He had chosen this life. For the past 3 years, he had lived in the deep Alaskan wilderness, miles away from the nearest town. He had grown tired of the noise, the crowds, the endless demands of a world he no longer wanted to be part of. Here in the stillness of the wild, he could be alone with his thoughts. But tonight the wilderness was not silent. A noise broke through the storm, faint at first, then louder, desperate pounding against his cabin door. Adam tensed, his fingers tightening around the mug of coffee he had been nursing by the fire. No one should be out in this weather, not unless they had a death wish. The pounding continued, frantic and uneven. Adam set his mug down and reached for his rifle. Caution was second nature out here. A stranded traveler was possible, but so was something worse, someone desperate enough to break into his home. He moved toward the door, his boots creaking against the wooden floor. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice firm. No answer, just more pounding. Adam's gut twisted. Every instinct told him to ignore it. He had seen storms like this bury vehicles and swallow entire hunting parties. If someone was out there, they were either already dead or close to it. And yet, with a deep breath, he unlocked the door and pulled it open. A figure collapsed into his arms. She was freezing to the touch, her body trembling violently against him. Long silver hair matted with ice fell over her face. Her skin was deathly, pale lips tinged blue. She barely managed to lift her head, her glassy blue eyes locking onto his. "I'm freezing," she gasped, her voice barely a whisper. "Human. Let me in. I beg." Adam stiffened. What had she just called him? She was delirious. That had to be it. No one in their right mind spoke like that. Still, she was ice cold, and if he left her out there, she wouldn't last another 5 minutes. He quickly pulled her inside and kicked the door shut, sealing out the vicious storm. The woman sagged against him, her body limp with exhaustion. Adam caught her, lowering her carefully onto the worn leather couch by the fire. He grabbed a heavy blanket from the chair and wrapped it around her shivering form. Up close, she was even stranger. Her features were too perfect, like something out of a dream. High cheekbones, delicate nose, and luminous blue eyes that seemed to glow faintly in the firelight. Her silver hair had a metallic sheen, the strands finer than anything he had ever seen. He shook off his unease. She was probably just some lost traveler, maybe a foreigner, which would explain the odd way she spoke. "What the hell were you doing out there?" he asked, kneeling beside her. She shuddered, struggling to speak. "Walking for hours." Her voice was weak, but there was an unnatural smoothness to it, like a song carried on the wind. "Had no choice, no other way." Adam frowned. "No other way? What does that mean?" She didn't answer. Instead, her trembling fingers reached for the blanket, pulling it tighter around herself. "All right, we'll talk later," Adam muttered, standing up. He grabbed the kettle from the stove and poured steaming water into a mug. A few spoonfuls of instant coffee later, he pressed the warm cup into her hands. She stared at it like she didn't recognize what it was. "It's coffee," he said. "Drink it, you need to warm up." After a moment's hesitation, she raised the cup to her lips and took a sip. A flicker of surprise crossed her face, but she drank it without complaint. Adam studied her carefully. "You lost?" She nodded. Weakly. "Yes." "Where were you headed?" Silence. She just stared at him, those eerie blue eyes searching his face as if looking for something. Finally, she said, "Nowhere. I only needed to get away." Adam's frown deepened. That wasn't an answer. "All right," he said slowly. "I get it. You're scared. You don't have to tell me everything right now, but I need to know the basics. Where did you come from? There's no town for miles. You couldn't have just walked into the middle of nowhere." She lowered the cup, fingers tightening around it. I fell, she whispered. My vessel. It is gone. Adam's stomach nodded. Vessel? He pushed down the unease rising in his chest. Maybe she meant a plane or a snowmobile. That would explain why she was out here in the first place. You crashed? He guessed. She hesitated. Yes. In what? Silence again. Adam sighed. He wasn't getting any straight answers tonight. She was probably still in shock. Maybe she'd make more sense once she got some rest. Adam sighed. He wasn't getting any straight answers tonight. She was probably still in shock. Maybe she'd make more sense once she got some rest. Listen, you can stay here until the storm passes, he said, pulling over a chair and sitting across from her. I'll radio the nearest outpost in the morning. Maybe they can send someone to pick you up. Her expression changed. A flicker of something, fear, panic, crossed her face. No, she said quickly. No one can come. Adam narrowed his eyes. Why not? I do not belong here. Something about the way she said it made the hair on the back of his neck rise. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. All right, then where do you belong? She hesitated, her gaze flickering toward the window, where the storm still raged. Then slowly, she met his eyes again. Not on this world. Adam stared at her. The room suddenly felt colder, despite the fire crackling in the hearth. What? He said. She inhaled shakily, setting the mug aside. I am not from here, she said softly. Not from your planet. Adam let out a dry laugh. Okay, you're delirious. You've been out in the cold too long. I speak the truth. Her voice was calm, steady. Too steady. Adam rubbed a hand over his face. Of all the things he had expected tonight, this was not one of them. A lost traveler, sure. Maybe even a fugitive. But an alien? He should throw her out. Call her crazy. Tell her to leave first thing in the morning. But something in her eyes told him she wasn't lying, or at least, she believed she wasn't. She shivered again, curling deeper into the blanket. Her breathing was slowing now, her body finally relaxing as warmth seeped into her bones. Adam sighed. We'll talk in the morning. She nodded, her gaze still, locked onto his. And then, just as she closed her eyes, she whispered, I will reward you. Adam didn't know why, but the way she said it made his skin crawl. As the storm raged outside, he sat back in his chair, staring at the stranger in his cabin, wondering what the hell he had just let in. The storm outside hadn't calmed, but inside the cabin the fire crackled softly, filling the space with a dim, flickering glow. Adam sat in his chair, his rifle resting against the wall beside him. His guest, if he could even call her that, was finally asleep, her breathing slow and steady beneath the thick blanket. He should have felt relieved. The stranger was no longer shivering, no longer at death's door. But instead of relief, unease gnawed at his gut. I am not from your planet. Her words replayed in his mind over and over again. He wanted to dismiss them, wanted to believe she was just some poor woman who had gotten lost in the storm, confused and half-frozen, her mind scrambling for meaning. But there was something about the way she said it, calm, certain, that made his stomach twist. Adam wasn't the kind of man who believed in aliens. He didn't buy into conspiracy theories, and he sure as hell didn't think little green men were flying around in the sky, watching humanity like some kind of experiment. But this woman, there was something wrong about her. He leaned forward, rubbing his hands together in thought. She had no ID, no belongings, no backpack, no survival gear. Nothing but the clothes on her back, which weren't nearly warm enough for the Alaskan wilderness. She should have been dead long before she reached his cabin. And yet, here she was. A gust of wind rattled the window, and Adam turned his gaze toward her. She looked almost peaceful now, curled beneath the blanket, her silver hair spilling over the pillow. In the firelight, Her skin had an almost iridescent sheen to it, like moonlight reflecting off fresh snow. Her features were impossibly delicate, her fingers long and slender in a way that didn't seem human. He shook his head. You're overthinking this. And yet he couldn't stop staring. Then, without warning, her eyes snapped open. Adam tensed. She didn't move, just stared at him with those unnervingly bright blue eyes. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then she whispered, "You are afraid of me." It wasn't a question. Adam exhaled through his nose, forcing himself to relax. "I don't know what to make of you yet." She blinked slowly, sitting up slightly. "I will not harm you. That's what people say right before they do." She tilted her head, studying him. "Your kind is deeply distrustful." Adam scoffed. "We call that being cautious." She was quiet for a moment, then said, "That caution has kept you alive." Something about the way she said it sent a chill down his spine. "Yeah," he muttered. "It has." She lowered her gaze as if considering her next words carefully. "I meant what I said earlier." Adam raised an eyebrow. "Which part? The part where you claim to be an alien? Or the part where you said you'd reward me?" Her lips curled slightly. Not quite a smile, but close. "Both." Adam leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "All right, let's say I believe you. Let's say you really aren't from Earth. Why are you here? And how the hell did you end up in a snowstorm in the middle of nowhere?" She took a slow breath, as if preparing herself. "I was traveling. My ship suffered a malfunction. I had no choice but to abandon it." Adam narrowed his eyes. "Your ship?" She nodded. "A vessel, not like the ones your people build. It moves beyond your sky, past the reach of your machines." His throat felt dry. "You mean a spaceship?" "Yes." Adam inhaled sharply, trying to steady himself. "And where is it now?" "Buried beneath the ice." The hairs on his arms stood on end. He wanted to tell her she was crazy, that this was impossible. But part of him, the part that had seen her survive the impossible, couldn't dismiss it so easily. "How long were you out there?" he asked. "I do not know," she admitted. "I lost my sense of time, but I walked until my body failed me." Adam frowned. The nearest town was over 30 miles away. If she had been walking for hours in this storm, she should have been dead, and yet she was here. She watched him carefully, as if reading his thoughts. "You doubt me." "Of course I do." A flicker of something passed through her gaze, understanding, maybe even amusement. "Your kind is fascinating," she murmured. "So quick to reject what does not fit into their understanding of the world." Adam exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "You're telling me you crashed a spaceship on Earth in the middle of nowhere and you just walked away from it?" She nodded. "Why?" Her expression darkened slightly. "Because if I had stayed, I would be dead." Adam's pulse quickened. "From what?" She hesitated. Then after a moment she said, "There are others. Those who would see me captured, destroyed." Adam's stomach twisted. "You mean other aliens?" "Yes. And they're looking for you?" She nodded. His mind reeled. If she was telling the truth, then there were more of them out there, possibly nearby. Adam cursed under his breath. "So what you're telling me is that by letting you in, I might have just put a giant target on my back?" She met his gaze. "Yes." Adam groaned, leaning back against his chair. "Unbelievable. I warned you." "No, you begged for my help," he corrected. "And now you're telling me I might die because of it." She tilted her head slightly. "You will not die." Adam let out a humorless laugh. "Yeah? And how do you know that?" "Because I will not allow it." The confidence in her voice sent another chill down his spine. There was no bravado, no arrogance, just certainty. Adam rubbed his temples. He had spent years out here avoiding people, avoiding danger. And now, in the span of a few hours, he had somehow ended up harboring a fugitive from another world. His life had just gotten a whole lot more complicated. He looked at her again, studying her face. Let's say I believe you. What happens next? She was silent for a long moment. Then she said, That depends. On what? On whether you wish to remain here. Adam frowned. What do you mean? She leaned forward slightly. You live alone in this place, far from others. You do not wish for companionship? His jaw clenched. That's none of your business. She smiled faintly. I could give you something no human woman could. Knowledge, strength, a life beyond this planet. Adam's breath caught. What? She studied him, her gaze unwavering. Come with me when the storm ends. I will take you beyond the stars. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. For years he had chosen solitude. He had told himself he was content, but now with the storm raging outside and an alien woman sitting across from him, offering him the universe, Adam wasn't sure anymore. Adam stared at the woman, his thoughts a tangled mess. She had just offered him something beyond comprehension, a life beyond Earth, a chance to leave everything behind. It should have been an easy decision. He had spent years in isolation, hiding from the world, sick of the noise and the weight of society's expectations. He had always told himself he wanted to disappear, and now, here she was, offering him exactly that. But something inside him twisted with unease. You're serious, he said slowly. She nodded. I do not waste words. Adam ran a hand over his face. This is insane. Her head tilted slightly. Is it? Yes. His voice was firm, but he wasn't so sure anymore. She watched him closely. You have no one here, no attachments, no bonds. What holds you to this world? Adam opened his mouth to answer, but nothing came out. What did hold him here? His cabin? The wilderness? His own stubborn need to be left alone? She seemed to sense his hesitation. I can show you things beyond your imagination, she said. Take you beyond this frozen wasteland to a place where the stars burn bright. Adam exhaled. And what's in it for you? She was silent for a moment. Then she said, a debt repaid. He narrowed his eyes. A debt? You saved me, she said simply. You brought me into your home when I would have died in the cold. Yeah, well, Adam muttered. I don't expect anything in return. Her lips curved slightly. That is why you deserve it. Adam shook his head. This was too much. He had spent years living a simple life, chopping wood, hunting, surviving. Now in a matter of hours his world had been flipped upside down. He needed time to think. He pushed himself up from the chair and grabbed his coat from the hook by the door. I need air, he muttered. She didn't stop him. She simply watched as he pulled on his boots and stepped outside into the storm. The cold bit into his skin immediately, but he welcomed it. He needed something real, something grounding. Snow whipped around him, thick and blinding. But he knew his surroundings well enough to navigate them even in the worst conditions. He walked a few feet from the cabin, inhaling the frozen air. His mind raced. Could she really be telling the truth? His gut told him yes, and that terrified him. He had always thought he wanted to escape. But leaving Earth? Leaving everything? He exhaled, his breath forming a cloud in the air. He needed time. Then he saw it, a light in the distance, not the warm glow of his cabin. No, this was different. Sharp, unnatural. A pale blue beam slicing through the storm. Adam froze. His heartbeat thundered in his chest. Something else was out here. Slowly, he crouched behind a snow-covered log, narrowing his eyes against the wind. 3. Figures moved through the storm. They were tall, unnaturally so, their bodies draped in long, flowing cloaks that shimmered even in the darkness. Their faces were obscured by helmets, smooth, reflective visors that glowed with the same eerie blue light as the beam. Adam's stomach turned to ice. He didn't know what he was looking at, but every instinct in his body screamed danger. They were searching for something. No, they were searching for her. He gritted his teeth, his grip tightening around the hunting knife strapped to his belt. He wasn't stupid. He knew he wouldn't stand a chance against whatever the hell these things were, but if they were looking for her, then that meant she was telling the truth. A part of him had still held on to the hope that she was just a lost, confused woman, that maybe she had suffered from some kind of trauma, that her story was just a delusion brought on by the cold. But this was real. The figures moved methodically, scanning the ground with small devices that emitted a faint hum. They were tracking her, closing in. Adam's pulse pounded in his ears. He had two choices. He could stay hidden, let them find her, and be done with this madness, or he could protect her. He exhaled sharply. Damn it. He turned and sprinted back to the cabin. She was already on her feet when he burst through the door. They're here, he panted. Her expression didn't change. I know. Adam grabbed his rifle from the wall. It wouldn't do much good if those things were as advanced as he thought, but it was better than nothing. They're tracking you, he said. She nodded. They will not stop. Adam clenched his jaw. Why are they after you? Because I left. Left what? She hesitated. My kind, my creators. Adam stared at her. Your creators? I was made, not born, she said. A creation of their design. But I was not meant to think for myself. I was not meant to run. Adam felt his throat tighten. You're a machine? No. Her voice was firm. I am alive. Just as you are. Adam exhaled. Jesus Christ. Outside, the wind howled. They were close. What do they want? He asked. To erase me. Adam's grip tightened on the rifle. Like hell. She stepped closer. You do not need to fight for me. The hell I don't. Adam muttered. I let you in. That makes this my problem now. For the first time, something like emotion flickered in her gaze. Then we must go, she said. Now. Adam hesitated. Go where? She turned toward the window, and then, for the first time, he saw it. A faint glimmer, just beyond the tree line, ship. Small, sleek, almost invisible against the storm. A single vessel, buried beneath the snow. His stomach clenched. She had never been lost. She had known where she was going all along. She had been leading him here. A part of him wanted to be angry, wanted to demand the truth, but there was no time. The blue lights outside grew brighter. We have seconds, she said. Adam swallowed hard, and then, against every instinct screaming at him to run, he grabbed his coat and followed her into the storm. Adam's breath burned in his lungs as he sprinted through the snow, following the silver-haired woman toward the buried ship. The storm howled around them, wind and ice slicing through the night like the warning cries of a dying world. Behind them, the blue lights grew closer. The pursuers were closing in. Adam's instincts screamed at him to turn and fight, to make a stand. But he knew it would be suicide. Whatever these things were, they were faster, stronger, and far beyond anything his rifle could handle. The woman, alien, machine, whatever she was, moved with an eerie grace, barely sinking into the snow as she ran. Adam, on the other hand, stumbled and pushed through knee-deep drifts, his legs aching from the effort. Then, suddenly, she stopped. Adam nearly crashed into her before he realized why. They had reached it. At first, the ship was nearly invisible, against the snow, a smooth, curved surface half buried in ice. But as the woman raised her hand, a thin seam of light traced along its surface, revealing the outline of an entry hatch. Get inside, she ordered. Adam didn't hesitate. The hatch slid open soundlessly, revealing a dimly lit interior. He scrambled in after her, and the moment they crossed the threshold, the hatch sealed behind them with a quiet hiss. The noise outside disappeared instantly. The howling wind, the crunching footsteps of their pursuers. It was all cut off, replaced by an almost eerie silence. Adam exhaled, chest heaving. Jesus. The inside of the ship was unsettling. The walls were smooth and metallic, but they weren't cold like metal should be. Instead, they pulsed faintly, as if the entire ship was alive, responding to their presence. A soft, humming glow filled the cabin as symbols and shapes flickered to life along the walls. Adam couldn't read them, but the woman moved with familiarity, running her hands over the glowing controls. "Can you fly this thing?" he asked, still catching his breath. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she pressed her palm against a circular pad, and suddenly the floor beneath them trembled. A deep, resonant hum filled the ship. Outside, through a small viewport, Adam saw the snow beginning to shift. The ship was moving. Then, the blue lights appeared in the distance. Their pursuers were here. Adam's stomach tightened. There were 3 of them standing just outside the ship. He couldn't see their faces through the reflective visors, but he could feel the way they stared at him. One of them raised a hand. A beam of searing blue light shot toward the ship, but before it could connect, the woman pressed something on the control panel, and in an instant, the world vanished. For a moment, there was nothing but weightlessness. Then, stars. Adam sucked in a sharp breath. The storm was gone. The ground was gone. They were floating. Through the viewport, Earth shrank beneath them, a vast expanse of swirling white and deep blue. The storm that had nearly killed the woman now looked like nothing more than a faint smudge against the atmosphere. Adam's fingers dug into the nearest surface as his mind struggled to process what was happening. "We're in space." The woman turned to him, her expression unreadable. "Yes." He let out a shaky breath. Jesus Christ. He wasn't sure if he was panicked or exhilarated, maybe both. The woman moved to another set of controls, and suddenly the viewport shifted, revealing something else. A ship. Not theirs. Bigger. Much bigger. Adam's stomach dropped. "Tell me that's not who I think it is." The woman's jaw tightened. "They followed us." Adam cursed. "Can we outrun them?" She hesitated. "No." His pulse pounded in his ears. "So what do we do?" She turned to face him fully. "We fight." Adam swallowed hard. "Great." The next few moments were a blur. The massive ship loomed in the distance, its dark, jagged structure blocking out the stars. It looked ancient, like something pulled from the depths of a nightmare, built not for exploration but for war. The woman's fingers moved over the controls, and suddenly, the interior of the ship shifted. The walls retracted slightly, revealing sleek panels of glowing weapon systems, their energy humming with barely contained power. Adam's stomach twisted. "You said they wanted to erase you." "Yes." "Why?" She finally looked at him, and for the first time, he saw something in her expression he hadn't expected. "Fear. I was built to be one of them," she said. "A tool. A weapon. But I refused." Adam's throat tightened. "And they don't like it when their weapons think for themselves." She nodded. A pulse of blue light flickered outside. The enemy ship was charging something. Adam clenched his jaw. "What do we do?" The woman turned back to the controls. "We end this." The ship lurched forward. Adam barely had time to brace himself before a blast of energy shot past them, missing by inches. His heart pounded. The woman moved with terrifying precision, weaving through space as though she had been born in it. The enemy ship loomed closer, and Adam caught a glimpse of something shifting along its surface, weapons priming. Then, the woman pressed a single button. A streak of white-hot energy erupted from their ship, cutting through the void like a lightning bolt. It slammed into the enemy vessel, tearing through its hull in a blinding explosion. Adam flinched. "Holy!" A second blast followed, then a third. The enemy ship buckled under the assault, its dark metal cracking apart. Fires burst from its sides, flickering uselessly in the vacuum of space. And then, silence. The enemy vessel drifted, its lights flickering. Adam exhaled shakily. "Is it?" The woman nodded. "It's over." Adam let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He turned to her. "So, What now? She studied him for a long moment. Now, she said, you choose. Adam frowned. Choose what? She gestured toward the viewport, where the stars stretched endlessly before him. Them. You can return to your world, she said, or you can come with me. Adam's stomach tightened. Earth still hung below them, distant and quiet. The life he had built, the solitude, the routine. It was all still there. But so was this. A chance to leave. A chance to see something more. He looked at her. The alien woman who wasn't supposed to be alive. The fugitive who had defied her own creators. The stranger who had become something more. He exhaled, and then with a small, almost reckless smile, he stepped forward. Let's see what's out there. The woman's lips curved slightly, and together they turned toward the stars.